What should you eat? It's the, constant question on people's minds. Eat this, don't eat that. It can get obviously very confusing. Dr. Chris Gardner, he's from Stanford. He's written a number of books, but I was just listening to him recently, and he talked about the fact that the American Heart Association does analyses fairly regularly, and they're looking at all the literature, and of course they're the American Heart Association, so they're looking at incidence of heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, etc. But what's important for this, so don't say, oh, I don't have heart disease and run away, is that the factors underlying what creates heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure has a commonality that has been proven again and again to avoid really all the degenerative diseases. So we're trying to avoid diabetes, we're trying to avoid cancer, we're trying to avoid autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's and dementia. So the beautiful thing is what's good for one is good for the other. So think of this as sort of what to do and not to do to avoid chronic disease, generally speaking. So the studies came out in 2006, 2021, and again this year, 2023. And they were looking at sort of 10 domains that covered what to do and what not to do. And so then Americans were saying, okay, that's nice. Like, what is this called? You know, is this Mediterranean? Is this keto? Like, what is it? So then what they did was they took 10 variations of diets. There's the DASH diet, which is dietary approaches for stopping hypertension, so obviously key to heart disease. And then they looked at Mediterranean. They looked at several forms of vegan and vegetarian. So they had a high-fat vegetarian, they had they had a low-fat vegetarian, a low-carbohydrate vegetarian, the same thing for vegan, so they did a lot of varieties on those, and then they had paleo and keto. So when they took all these diets and looked at the common threads amongst them that fit with their criteria of what they found that humans did the best to avoid heart disease, stroke, hypertension, what they found was that the DASH and the Mediterranean diet did the best, keto and paleo did the worst. So it was like, okay. And then they summed it down to, okay, fine, do these 4 things, just 4 things that you have to do. And one was to consume a lot more vegetables, to consume real food, which you can look at as not processed food on the flip side of that, to really decrease your sugar intake and decrease your refined grain intake. So pretty simple 4 things, and it wouldn't mean much if Americans did that. But those really are the areas that we are terrible in as far as our diet is concerned. Americans absolutely do not eat enough vegetables. They do tend toward the processed food. We've gone over this in other videos of Americans are eating like 67% processed food. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then of course, too much sugar goes along with that. And what was the 4th one? Less refined grains. So, and refined grains can be a little bit tricky too, because you say, oh no, I used to do the white bread, but now I went to the whole wheat bread. But if you look at the ingredients of the whole wheat bread, if it's still like, 10, 20, 15 ingredients, sometimes up to 30 ingredients, that's not a whole grain. A whole grain would literally be like a wheat berry. It would be, oat groats, things that are very unrefined. They're in their most natural state. So really by the time something's a bread, it's been broken down so much that it's not a complex carbohydrate. It's become a simple carbohydrate or a refined grain. So these are the 4 things that when they culled down all 10 different diets, these were the 4 things that stood true. And what Dr. Gardner was saying, so like, why can't we all get along? Like, why is all this bickering of my way, no, my way? When really these 4 things really had a commonality. Everybody agreed. And I've talked about this before, actually, is that we can all agree we have to eat a lot less sugar, and we can all agree that we need more vegetables. So these 4 things, if you can really make that change in your diet, would go a very long way. And then there was sort of the next tier of change, which is eating more beans. I can come back to that in a moment if you're afraid of lectins. Eating more beans, having some eggs, having some fish, nuts and seeds, olive oils. So things like that is sort of the next tier down of what to add and address, and see how your body does with it. So the lectin concern with beans is real from the viewpoint of there are lectins in beans. Now, what the research shows is by the time you've fully cooked a bean, and it takes quite a bit to fully cook a bean. That's why I tend to get canned beans, and because it's easier. And then you just rinse them, and really a large percentage of the lectins have then been eliminated. So these little sort of anti-nutrient aspects of beans do not in any way overshadow the benefit of beans for their high fiber content and pulling toxins out of the gut, feeding the good microbes in the gut. So definitely, if and I've talked about this before too, if you haven't been consuming beans, you definitely want to start on a tiny little gradient, because they are hard to digest, but in a very good way. So start low and slow and gradually build up until your body is tolerating it. And factually, that trouble digesting beans has to do with the fact that you don't have the microbes that know how to digest the beans. So as you go low and slow, you're going to start to build up those good microbes and then get rid of the bad microbes, and it's a very powerful thing to do for your gut. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Dr. Chris Gardner is about to come out with a new book. It was kind of funny as he was being interviewed. He said, well, he wanted to call the book "It Depends," meaning, it depends on if you've got this, that, or the other. And he said, yeah, the publisher was was not a fan. So the new book doesn't have a name yet, but yeah, he's written several before, and just has what I consider a very sane viewpoint about food. So not in any of these particular camps, but what generally works for most humans. So hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and let me know other things you want to hear about. I love to know what your thoughts are. I hope you found this video helpful. If you want more on this topic and others, click here.